My name is Cora Shaw. For the past 15 years, my life has been one of patient restoration. I'm a bookbinder and paper conservator, a profession that chose me as much as I chose it. In my small studio, tucked away on a quiet, tree-lined street in the city of Oak Haven, I spend my days mending the broken spines of old novels, carefully suturing torn pages, and coaxing the faded ink of forgotten letters back to life. It's a quiet craft, one that requires a steady hand and a heart that understands that some things of great value are fragile, and that healing takes time. It's a philosophy I've tried to apply to my own life. My family was not born of convenience, but of a quiet, deliberate love. I met my husband, Liam, at a local farmer's market. He was standing by a stall of late-season apples, a small, serious-looking boy with wide, brown eyes perched on his shoulders. The boy was Noah. Liam was his father, a man whose kind face was etched with a sorrow he didn't try to hide. He told me, over coffee that first afternoon, that Noah's biological mother had left when their son was just shy of his first birthday. There had been no fight, no dramatic exit. She had simply decided that the weight of motherhood was not a burden she wished to carry. She signed away her rights, moved across the country, and dissolved into silence. Liam was raising his son alone, a landscape architect whose hands were more comfortable with soil and stone than with the delicate intricacies of a toddler's heart. I fell in love with them both, slowly and then all at once. Noah was a cautious child, but within a year, he began to call me Mama, his small voice finding a home in a word I never knew I was waiting to hear. I didn't correct him. 2 years later, our daughter, Sophie, was born. She arrived into a house already filled with a gentle, weathered love. She and Noah were never half-siblings. They were a unit, their bond forged in whispered secrets and shared bowls of cereal. We were a family, mended and whole, a quiet tapestry woven from different threads. We were happy. We were steady. And then, 6 months ago, the world tilted on its axis. Noah disappeared from school during his lunch break. He told his teacher he'd left his water bottle in his cubby and walked out of the noisy cafeteria. He never returned. There was no footage, no witnesses who saw him leave the school grounds, no note. Just an echoing void where our son used to be. His backpack was found later that day, tucked behind a lavender bush in a park 2 blocks away. Inside, everything was as it should be, except for him. The police called it a non-familial abduction, a chillingly sterile term for a wound that bled us dry. The days blurred into a nightmarish fog of interviews, searches, and vigils. Liam grew silent, his grief a heavy cloak he wore day and night. Sophie would wake up crying, calling for her brother. I moved through our home like a ghost, my own work of restoration feeling like a cruel joke. How could I mend a 17th century Bible when my own family was torn to shreds? The silence from the kidnappers was the most terrifying part. There was no ransom demand, no contact, nothing. Just the deafening absence of our son. We decided to go to my parents for Christmas. For Sophie's sake. We would put on the smiles, endure the suffocating pleasantries, and pretend to be whole. We would survive the day. That was the goal. But as I stood in their living room, breathing in the familiar scent of salt air and my mother's evergreen potpourri, I knew that survival was a far more complicated thing than I had ever imagined. My parents' house, which they christened Seacrest with a touch of unearned grandeur, sits on a bluff overlooking the slate-gray waters of the Pacific. It's the house I grew up in, a place of creaking floors, drafty windows, and the unspoken rule that difficult emotions were to be polished away like tarnish on silver. Christmas at Seacrest was always a performance. The living room was a stage, awash in the warm glow of the tree, filled with relatives whose laughter always seemed a note too high. My younger sister, Tessa, was holding court near the fireplace, a glass of champagne in one hand, gesturing animatedly. She was, as always, the center of the family's orbit, a bright, dazzling star whose light often left others in shadow. I was the quiet planet, reliable in my rotation, steady and largely unnoticed. From the moment she was born, 5 years after me, our roles were set. Tessa was the artist, the dreamer, the one who made beautiful, chaotic messes. I was the one who quietly tidied up, who got the scholarships, who never caused a scene. Our parents loved us differently. They admired me, but they adored her. They saw her fragility as something to be protected, my strength as something to be relied upon. "Cora, darling, you look exhausted," my mother, Eleanor, murmured, gliding past me with a tray of canapés. She patted my arm, a gesture that was meant to be comforting, but felt like a quiet judgment. "It's so good you made the effort." "For Sophie's sake, of course." I gave her a tight smile. Liam was standing by the large bay window, staring out at the churning sea, a ghost at the feast. He hadn't wanted to come, but we both knew that isolating ourselves would only deepen the wound for our daughter. The gift-giving was a chaotic family tradition. Every child received a present from every adult, a mountain of wrapping paper and bows that quickly consumed the floor. Sophie, bless her resilient heart, was genuinely excited. For a few hours, she was just an 8-year-old girl, her face lit with the pure, unadulterated joy of Christmas. I watched her from my armchair, a fragile warmth spreading through my chest. For a moment, I could almost breathe. She had a small pile of treasures beside her, a book of constellations, a watercolor paint set, a knitted doll. She then picked up a medium-sized box wrapped in shimmering silver paper, a small, handwritten tag attached to the ribbon. She read it aloud, her voice clear. "To Sophie, love from Aunt Tessa, Uncle David, and Chloe." She worked at the paper carefully, her small fingers peeling back the tape with the same precision I used in my studio. She lifted the lid of the plain white box, and then she stilled. It was as if a switch had been flipped. The light in her eyes vanished. Her smile dissolved. Her shoulders grew rigid, and her breath caught in her throat. The vibrant, living color drained from her face, leaving behind a waxy pallor. I felt it instantly, a cold, sharp spike of dread in my gut. That primal parental instinct that senses danger before the mind can process it. She didn't cry out. She didn't drop the box. She stood up slowly, her movements unnaturally deliberate, as if she were carrying something exquisitely fragile or infinitely dangerous. She walked across the crowded room, a small, pale ghost weaving through the festive chaos. No one else seemed to notice. My father was laughing at a joke, Tessa was showing someone photos on her phone, and the other children were consumed by their new toys. She reached my chair and her small, cold hand found mine. "Mommy," she whispered, her voice barely a tremor. "I'm scared." Her eyes, wide and dark, pleaded with me. "Just look. Please don't say what it is." I leaned forward and peered into the box she held cradled in her arms. At first glance, it was just a toy. A small, carved wooden bird, painted a soft robin's egg blue. It was simple, rustic, something you might find at a craft fair. But then my eyes focused, and the world fell away. The roaring fire, the cheerful carols, the smell of pine, it all vanished, sucked into a silent, freezing vacuum. I knew that bird. It was carved from linden wood, sanded smooth to fit perfectly in a child's palm. Noah had won it at a school fair a year ago. I remembered him showing it to me, his face glowing with pride. But it wasn't just the bird. It was the flaw. There was a tiny, almost imperceptible chip on the tip of its left wing. A week before he disappeared, Noah had tried to fix it himself. He'd taken one of Sophie's acrylic paints, a brilliant cerulean blue that was just a shade too bright, and carefully painted over the tiny wound. The smear of cerulean blue stared up at me from the box. A small, perfect testament to an impossible truth. My hands started to shake. I looked up, scanning the room, my heart hammering against my ribs. Everything appeared normal. My mother was arranging napkins. Liam was still by the window, lost in his own world. My sister was laughing. It was a perfectly painted scene of holiday cheer, but I knew the canvas was rotten. "Come on, sweetie," I said, my voice a strained whisper. I took the box from her, its weight feeling immense in my hands. "Let's go get some fresh air." "Is everything all right, Cora?" My aunt's voice floated from behind me. I manufactured a smile that felt like cracking glass. "She's just feeling a bit overwhelmed. All the excitement. We'll be back in a moment." We walked out of the warm, noisy house and into the biting December wind. The salty air was a shock to my lungs. We didn't go to the porch. We went straight to our car, parked at the end of the long, gravel driveway. Sophie climbed into the back seat and curled into a tight ball, her face pressed against the cold window. I slid into the passenger seat and just stared at the box on my lap. The wooden bird, the tissue paper, the weight of all it represented. A hot tear traced a path down my cold cheek. I was holding a piece of my son. A piece of him that had been gone for 6 agonizing months. A piece of him that was now, inexplicably, here. And I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that this day had shattered our lives all over again, but in a completely new and terrifying way. I held that knowledge for 2 long, silent minutes. Then, with a trembling finger, I unlocked my phone and dialed 911. The quiet of the car was a sanctuary. The sound of my own breathing, ragged and uneven, filled the small space. Through the windshield, the lights of my parents' house glowed, a beacon of a life that no longer felt like mine. Inside, someone was still laughing. When the police cruiser pulled into the driveway, its lights off, it moved with a deliberate, respectful quiet. A single officer, a woman with a calm, tired face, stepped out. I met her halfway, the box held out in front of me like an offering. I explained the situation in a low, flat voice, the words feeling foreign and rehearsed. I told her about Noah, about the 6 months of silence, about the bird. She looked at the small, painted chip on the wing. "And you're certain?" "I'm certain," I said. She found the gift tag, still attached to the discarded wrapping paper in the box. "Chloe," she read. "That's my niece," I told her. "My sister Tessa's daughter." The officer nodded slowly, her expression unreadable. "We'll need to speak with them." When we walked back into the house, the officer behind me, a hush fell over the room. The forced cheer evaporated, replaced by a tense, confused silence. My mother's hand flew to her mouth. My father stood up, his face clouded with bewilderment. The officer was discreet and professional. She asked to speak with Tessa and her daughter, Chloe, in a private room. They went into my father's study. Tessa's face was a mask of pleasant inquiry, but I saw the flicker of something else in her eyes, something tight and controlled. Liam appeared at my side just as they closed the study door. He must have seen the cruiser from the window. He didn't ask what was happening. He just stood with me, his presence a solid, grounding weight in the swirling chaos of my mind. We waited. The minutes stretched into an eternity. We could hear muffled voices from the study, but nothing distinct. 10-year-old Chloe emerged first, her face blotchy and tear-streaked. She ran to her father. Tessa followed a moment later, her composure frayed at the edges. She told the officer the same story she would later tell us. She had no idea where the toy came from. They had boxes of old toys in the attic. Chloe must have found it there, thought it was pretty, and wrapped it for Sophie. A simple, childish mistake. The police took the wooden bird, sealed in an evidence bag. It looked so small, so innocent. They said they would be in touch. And then they were gone, leaving a vacuum of suspicion and unspoken questions in their wake. The party was over. Guests made quiet, awkward excuses, and slipped away. My parents hovered, wanting to ask, but not daring to. An hour later, only our 2 families remained, rattling around in the cavernous silence of the house. Liam and I were in the kitchen. I was sitting at the table, my hands clasped tightly in my lap. He was leaning against the counter, staring at nothing. "It was his," I said, the words feeling like stones in my mouth. "The bird. He took it to school with him that day. I remember, because he was worried it would get lost." Liam didn't reply. He didn't need to. We both knew what it meant. That bird hadn't been in our house for 6 months. It had been with Noah. And if it was now in my sister's house, then the chasm of the unknown had narrowed to a single, terrifying point. The thought that followed was both a spike of hope and a blade of pure agony. If the bird was here, then maybe Noah wasn't lost to the world. Maybe he was just lost to us. We found Tessa in the sunroom, scrolling through her phone, bathed in the pale, wintry light. She was affecting an air of nonchalance that was so transparent it was painful. She looked up as we entered, forcing a bright, brittle smile. "Hey." What a nightmare, huh? Can you believe all that drama over an old toy? Liam's silence was more intimidating than any shout. I stepped forward. We need to talk to you, Tessa. Now. About what? She asked, her voice a little too high. I told the police everything I know. Chloe found it. End of story. Noah had that bird with him the day he disappeared, Liam said. His voice was low and gravelly, stripped of all emotion. Tessa's eyes flickered. You can't know that for sure. It's been months. We are sure, I said, my voice quiet but unyielding. Sophie remembers. I remember. He never came to your house, Tessa. He hasn't been to your house in over a year. So how did a toy he had with him on his last day with us end up in your attic for your daughter to find? She let out a short, sharp laugh that held no humor. I don't know, Cora. Maybe one of the kids brought it over during a playdate ages ago and you forgot. Your memory is not infallible. We didn't forget, Liam stated, his words like chips of ice. He was never there. The manufactured smile finally crumbled from her face, leaving behind something raw and frightened. Why are you doing this? She whispered, her eyes darting between us. Why are you trying to blame me for something? I took another step closer, my entire being focused on her. Because the police are going to find out, Tessa. They're going to trace that toy. They're going to question everyone. And I promise you, their questions will be much harder than ours. When they uncover what you did, you won't have the chance to explain it to us first. So you will explain it to us now. Her face went ashen. She looked from me to Liam, her gaze skittering away, unable to meet either of ours. Her carefully constructed facade shattered, and all that was left was the ugly, twisted truth. Don't tell them, she pleaded, her voice breaking. Please. Then tell us, I insisted. She wrung her hands, her eyes filling with tears she seemed unable to shed. She took a shaky breath. It was his mother, she whispered, the words barely audible. Noah's biological mother. She found me online a few months ago. The air in the room grew thick, heavy. I felt a cold dread coiling in my stomach. She called me, Tessa continued, her voice gaining a desperate, rushed quality. She was crying. She said she'd made a terrible mistake. She just wanted to see him, to talk to him one more time. She said she missed him so much it was killing her. Liam's fists clenched at his sides, the knuckles white. He remained silent. She offered me money, Tessa whispered, her gaze fixed on the floor. $10,000. I didn't ask for it, she offered. And I needed it, Cora. You know I did. You'd cut me off. David's commissions have been down. We were behind on the mortgage. I thought it would be harmless. One visit. An hour, that's what she said. My own breath hitched in my chest. I told her his school schedule. I told her when he had his lunch break in the park. She promised she would have him back before the last bell. She promised. Tessa finally looked at me, her eyes swimming with a desperate plea for absolution. But he didn't come back, she sobbed, the words tumbling out now. She never brought him back. I called her phone, and it was disconnected. She was gone. I panicked. I didn't know what to do. I kept telling myself she'd bring him back the next day or the day after that. And then it was a week, and then a month, and I was too scared. I was so scared. Her voice broke completely. Please, she wept. I have children. My life would be ruined. I never, ever meant for any of this to happen. The world tilted, and a wave of nausea washed over me. I looked at my sister, at the person I had grown up with, whose secrets I had kept and whose tears I had dried, and I felt nothing but a vast, cold emptiness. You let us grieve, I said, my voice hollow. You watched us fall apart. You came to our house with casseroles and platitudes while you knew. You knew he wasn't dead. Liam finally turned his head, his face a mask of agony. We buried our son in our minds every single night for 6 months, Tessa. I didn't know what else to do, she wailed. I didn't say it, but the thought screamed in my mind. You could have told the truth. We left her there, sobbing in the pale light of the sunroom. Liam didn't say a word as we walked to the car, collected a sleepy, confused Sophie from the living room, and drove away from Seacrest. We didn't go home. We drove straight to the Oak Haven police precinct. We told them everything. The phone calls, the money, the meeting, the lie she had carried like a precious, dark secret while our world burned to the ground. Tessa was arrested the following morning. The charges were obstruction of justice and hindering a criminal investigation, with the promise of more to come. I didn't answer the phone when she called me from jail. I didn't listen to the frantic voicemail she left. The house was a tomb. We moved through the rooms in a state of suspended animation, caught between the horror of the past 6 months and the terrifying, fragile hope of the future. We were in limbo, waiting for a phone call that could either rebuild our world or shatter it for good. Then the phone rang. It was my mother. I answered, a foolish, reflexive act. "How could you?" she began, her voice sharp with fury, dispensing with any greeting. "How could you do this to your sister? To your own family?" I was too stunned to speak. "To call the police on her, Cora. At Christmas. You humiliated her, you've ruined her life, her children's lives." A cold, clear anger, unlike anything I had ever felt, rose in me. "She sold my son, Mother. She took money to arrange his kidnapping. She made a mistake," my mother insisted, her voice rising. "She was trying to help a mother reconnect with her child. It's not as if he's your real son anyway. He has a mother. Maybe she just took him where he belongs." The line went dead in my ears. I didn't realize I had hung up on her. The cruelty of her words, the casual dismissal of my love, of my motherhood, of Noah's very place in our family, it was a deeper betrayal than even Tessa's. It was the final, crumbling stone in a foundation I had long suspected was built on sand. Liam walked into the room, his face grim. He didn't have to ask what she'd said. He could see it on my face. In that moment, I understood that the family I had been born into was gone. It had, perhaps, never really been there at all. 3 days later, the phone rang again. A detective from the precinct. Liam answered, listened for a moment, and then held the phone out to me, his hand shaking. "Mrs. Shaw," a calm voice said. "We found her. We found Anna Morales, Noah's biological mother. She's been living under an assumed name in a small town in Oregon. And she has your son." My knees buckled. I sank onto the floor, the phone pressed to my ear. "Is he?" I couldn't finish the sentence. "He's alive, Mrs. Shaw," the detective said gently. "He's alive and he's safe. We're bringing him home." They arranged a video call. A screen in a sterile room at the police station became a window into a world I thought I had lost forever. Liam sat beside me rigid, his hands clasped so tightly his knuckles were white. I think, until that moment, some part of him hadn't truly believed it. Then, the screen flickered to life. And there he was. Noah. He looked thinner, paler. His hair was longer, falling into his eyes. He was wearing a faded sweatshirt that wasn't his. But it was him. The familiar curve of his cheek, the small mole just above his eyebrow. He was 9 years old now, and the 6 months away had aged him in ways I couldn't comprehend. I felt my breath leave my body in a ragged sob. "Noah," I whispered. "Hi, sweetheart." He just stared at the screen, his expression cautious, guarded. He didn't smile. "She told me you didn't want me anymore," he said, his voice small and flat. "She said you told her to come and get me because I was too much trouble." A fresh wave of pain, sharp and visceral, ripped through me. I saw Liam flinch as if he'd been struck. "Oh, Noah, no," I said, my voice thick with tears. "That's not true. That is the biggest lie in the world. We never, ever stopped looking for you. Not for a single second." Liam leaned into the camera, his own voice raw with emotion. "You are our son, Noah. Always. Nothing will ever change that." Noah looked down at his hands, then back at the screen. A flicker of something the old Noah, the boy we knew, passed through his eyes. "I didn't believe her," he said quietly. "Not really. But she said it so many times." "You know the truth now," I said, a desperate prayer. He gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. An officer on his end said our time was up. "We're coming to get you, buddy," Liam said, his voice firm. "We're on our way." Noah didn't smile, but the fear in his eyes seemed to recede, replaced by a weary sort of acceptance. "Okay," he said. "I'll be here." The screen went black. That night, for the first time in 6 months, I let myself truly weep. Not for the son we had lost, but for the one we were about to find, and for the long, unknown road that lay ahead of us. Noah came home on a Thursday afternoon. We met him at a small, private airfield where the state plane landed. He walked down the steps with a social worker, clutching a worn duffel bag. When he saw us, me, Liam, and Sophie, standing just a few feet away, he stopped. He looked at us, as if trying to decide if we were real or just another dream that would fade. Sophie couldn't wait. She broke away from my hand and ran to him, throwing her arms around his waist. For a second, he remained stiff, and then his arms wrapped around her, holding on as if she were an anchor in a storm. He dropped the bag and buried his face in her hair. I approached slowly, kneeling in front of him. "Hi, Noah." He looked at me, his eyes full of 100 unspoken things. Then he let go of Sophie and stepped into my arms. He was all sharp angles and trembling shoulders, but he was real. He was warm. He was home. Liam knelt beside us, his hand resting gently on Noah's back, and for the first time in half a year, the four of us were a circle again. The weeks that followed were a delicate dance. Noah was quiet, startling at loud noises, sleeping with a nightlight on. He spoke in short, clipped sentences, as if words were a currency he couldn't afford to waste. Sophie became his shadow, a fierce little guardian who seemed to understand that her constant, unwavering presence was the best medicine. We enrolled him in therapy with a kind, patient woman who specialized in childhood trauma. There was no pressure, no expectation. Our only job, we knew, was to be a constant, loving presence. To prove to him, day by day, that we were not going anywhere. Progress came in small, quiet moments. One evening, I found him and Sophie on his bedroom floor, drawing side by side in comfortable silence. He looked up at me and asked, "Can we have pizza tomorrow?" With the pepperoni. It was the first time he had asked for something, the first flicker of a future tense. I felt a surge of hope so powerful it almost brought me to my knees. Tessa took a plea bargain. She was sentenced to 18 months in a county facility for reckless endangerment and accessory to custodial interference, followed by 3 years of probation. In court, she cried and spoke of her deep regret, of a mistake that had spiraled out of control. I felt nothing watching her. Not anger, not pity. Just a profound and sorrowful distance. She wrote me a letter from prison. Liam burned it in our fireplace without either of us reading it. Anna Morales, Noah's biological mother, was extradited and faced her own charges. Her defense painted a picture of a mentally unstable woman consumed by a misguided maternal love. She was sentenced to 4 years in prison and given a permanent no-contact order. In her statement, she said, "I just wanted to fix what I broke." The irony was devastating. My parents tried to reach out. Voicemails from my father, full of blustering sorrow. A long, rambling letter from my mother about the importance of forgiveness, about how family is all we have. I didn't reply. The boundary I had drawn was not built of anger, but of self-preservation. Some things, once broken, cannot be mended. Some relationships are not worth the cost of restoring. My work had taught me that sometimes the most compassionate act is to let a thing rest, to acknowledge that its time is over. My family of origin was a book whose spine was irrevocably broken. I chose to close it and place it on a high shelf. A year has passed. It's a warm summer evening, and the scent of jasmine hangs in the air. I'm sitting on our back porch, a cup of chamomile tea growing cool in my hands. In the yard, Sophie is trying to teach Noah a complicated cartwheel. He's laughing, a real, deep belly laugh, the kind I thought I might never hear again. He stumbles, they both fall into a heap on the soft grass, and the sound of their shared giggles is the most beautiful music in the world. Liam comes out and sits beside me, slipping his hand into mine. He doesn't say anything. He doesn't need to. We watch our children, our brave, resilient children, and I feel a sense of peace that is deeper and more profound than any I have ever known. Our life is not perfect. There are scars. Noah still has nightmares some nights. Sophie still checks to make sure his door is closed before she goes to sleep. And my heart still carries the quiet ache of my broken family. But the life we have built, the one we chose and fought for, is strong. It is built not on obligation or shared blood, but on a fierce, deliberate love. We are a family restored, not to what we were before, but to something new. Something stronger. We are home.